Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Heather Sells. The Jordanian government has retaliated for the brutal murder of one of its Air Force pilots. It tried to work out a hostage swap with the Islamic State, but after the horrific killing of the pilot, the Jordanians have now responded by executing 2 terrorists. Gary Lane has more.
An ambulance transports the bodies of 2 al-Qaeda terrorists executed at this prison. The Jordanian government made good on its pledge to kill the terrorist captives if the Islamic State harmed Air Force pilot Maoz el-Qassasbeh. It took the action after a gruesome video appeared on the internet this week, showing the caged Jordanian pilot being burned to death by ISIS militants. The video is too graphic for us to show you, but it sparked outrage and protests throughout the Jordanian kingdom. And this response from President Obama as he met with Jordanian King Abdullah at the White House Tuesday.
It's just one more indication of the viciousness and barbarity of this organization.
ISIS militants captured Qassasbeh after his plane went down during an airstrike in Syria last December. The Jordanians had hoped to exchange the pilot in a swap offered by ISIS. The Islamic State wanted to win the release of this female terrorist. But before the exchange could be arranged, the Jordanians demanded one big condition.
We want to see a proof of life.
But when that gruesome video of the pilot's death by incineration appeared on the internet, the Jordanians knew it was too late for a hostage swap. In fact, his murder may have actually occurred a month ago, long before talks of an exchange started. The Jordanian pilot execution video came just days after ISIS released a video showing the beheading of a Japanese Christian journalist.
At some point, this kind of act backfires on a group like ISIS.
The Jordanian government had promised to retaliate by delivering a strong, earth-shaking, and decisive response to their pilot's murder. What isn't known at this time is if the execution of the 2 al-Qaeda terrorists is it, or a much greater response is yet to come. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Both ISIS and Boko Haram in Nigeria have declared their own Islamic caliphates. ISIS was the first to announce it was establishing a caliphate last summer, but most of the world doesn't really understand what an Islamic caliphate is or why it's so important to Muslims. Here's CBN's Chris Mitchell from Jerusalem.
When a terrorist leader boldly declared a new caliphate, it sent shockwaves throughout the Middle East. The so-called Islamic State became the first caliphate in nearly 100 years. When Abu al-Baghdadi made his announcement, other groups like al-Qaeda and the Muslim Brotherhood condemned it. Regardless of the internal competition, the caliphate would be a dream come true in the Islamic world.
This dream holds together some kind of a feeling that under the caliphate there is going to be a wonderful Islamic world. There's going to be a unity of all the Muslims. There is going to be a world power that cannot be matched by anything.
Islamic expert Professor Moshe Sharon says the caliphate began after the death of Muhammad.
Immediately after the Prophet's death, somebody from the Islamic community had to lead the community. In Arabic, the word caliph is a substitute, somebody who takes the place of.
A long line of these caliphs have ruled during Islam's 1400-year history.
This huge empire which was created was called the caliphate, which means this huge territory with huge Islamic community at the head of which there is somebody who substitutes. Basically, they say to substitute the prophet, but it's not true. Basically, somebody who substitutes God himself, because God is in heaven. Somebody has got to look after the faithful on earth, and of course, he is the caliph.
On earth, the caliph fights the non-Muslim world, called the House of War.
It's a mistake to think that he is like the Pope of the Muslims. He is a political and military leader, that under him all the Islamic world is united, and of course the war and the fighting against the Christian world would be far easier.
Today, the jihadist offensive in the Middle East stretches from Gaza to Iraq.
It's all part of an offensive move by forces that may have different names: ISIS, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, what have you. But they're all on a mission, and that is to build a caliphate.
Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg says for these Muslims, it's a religious war.
To kill every Jew and Christian in their way, and to kill every Muslim that doesn't believe in a radical way that they believe. And this is a move. And why is it happening now? In part, it's happening because they believe that the time for the caliphate has come.
Sharon says Jerusalem is the prize and world domination their goal.
The major aim of the caliphate is to rule the world. And this can be done under the leadership of one caliph who he himself only can declare a holy war, a jihad.
More than a decade after 9/11, the West is still coming to grips with Islam's holy war. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
As Kurdish forces continue to fight Islamic State militants in Iraq, they are seeing some Westerners join their ranks. Among them, a recruit wearing a tactical vest with the words "Christ is Lord" scribbled on it. That is Jordan Matson, a former U.S. Army soldier. He says he feels a sense of duty to help the Kurdish since they stood by the American military during its decade-long operation in Iraq, and he's willing to die defending them. Matson and 3 other Americans and an Australian national all say they arranged to join Kurdish forces through Facebook. A group of Muslims in northern Texas has created what may be the first official Sharia law system in the U.S. The Sharia Tribunal in Irving, Texas, is trying to assure Americans they're not planning to follow the type of Sharia law practiced in Muslim countries. In those places, severe punishments are handed out for even small crimes. Women have very few rights, and blasphemy against Muhammad can result in a death sentence.
In their mind, a misconception about what they see through the media, that Sharia means cut the heads, chop the heads, and cut the hands, and whatever. We are not in that. We are not here to invade White House, to invade Austin.
The imam at the mosque and 3 other Muslim judges are planning to bypass the traditional courts of Texas to handle cases on their own. They'll deal with things like divorce and business disputes. Opponents of Sharia law caution that allowing Sharia courts to operate in the U.S. allows Islamic law to replace U.S. law. It may lead to the creation of Islamic enclaves within the U.S. and will undermine the established U.S. rights of some of the victims. In Taiwan, at least 19 are dead after a Trans-Asia flight turned on its side midair, clipped an elevated highway, and careened into a shallow river. The turboprop plane was carrying 58 people. You can see a dramatic video clip here, taken from a car driving on Taiwan's national freeway. Rescuers are searching for the missing in the Keelung River. More than half of the passengers were Chinese traveling to the Taiwanese-controlled Kinmen Islands. A spokesman for TransAsia said the plane crashed just 4 minutes after takeoff, and the cause is still unknown. The Indiana Senate is backing a bill that makes it legal for religious institutions that receive state and local contracts to hire based on religion. Republican Senator Travis Holdman says he sponsored the measure to restore the ability of religious institutions like Indiana Wesleyan University to receive state workforce training grants. Last year, officials determined that the university's religious lifestyle mandate violated state contracting requirements against employment discrimination. Opponents of the bill say its language is too broad and could lead to lawsuits. The measure now moves to the House. Well, British lawmakers have approved a new technique meant to keep genetic diseases from being passed from mother to child. And it sounds good, but opponents say the controversial method raises many ethical concerns and could one day lead to designer babies. Caitlin Burke has more.
It's a technique that allows babies to be created from the DNA of 3 people, 2 women and 1 man. This sets the stage for the UK to become the first country with a law that allows embryos to be modified this way.
This isn't genetic modification. We're not altering the nucleus. We're not altering those 50% of genes that come from each parent. It's 0.054% of the genome, and there are only 37 genes to give energy to the cell.
The technique requires an embryo to be altered before it's transferred into the mother, a move currently forbidden by British law. One House of British Parliament just approved the measure, and if the House of Lords also votes to allow it, the first baby with 3 biological parents could be born as early as next year. But candidates for these specially created babies must have a specific problem: faulty mitochondria.
When you have a baby and find out that your baby's ill or got something that you've got, and life expectancy for a child, the mitochondria is very short, very short. And I think that's devastating for a woman.
Mitochondria are structures outside the cell's nucleus that help produce energy for the cell. Mitochondrial defects can result in diseases like muscular dystrophy, heart, kidney, and liver failure, and severe muscle weakness. But opponents say the DNA swapping technique isn't safe or ethical. The group Human Genetics Alert says the move would open the door to further genetically modified children.
This would be the first time that we would intentionally manipulate the human genome. It's something that governments around the world have agreed for the last 20 years that we shouldn't do, and once you cross that line, then it's very hard to stop going down the slippery slope to designer babies.
The scientists behind the new technique say it would likely only be used in about a dozen British women every year. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
We'll have more on this brave new world of creating babies in just a few minutes, taking a closer look at the new trend of young women freezing their eggs. Well, classes are finally resuming at one Virginia college today after the entire campus was closed down by an outbreak of the norovirus. Hampden-Sydney College has been shut down since Saturday to prevent the extremely contagious virus from spreading further. The drastic step was taken after nearly 300 students contracted the severe stomach bug. School officials worked for days to sanitize every room on campus since the virus can remain contagious for up to 2 weeks.
We understand that they are following to the letter recommendations provided both by the Virginia Department of Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The college disinfected nearly the entire campus, from student housing areas to bathrooms and all public areas. It's even bought fogging machines to blast wider areas with disinfectant. Coming up, beating that biological clock, why more and more women may be freezing their eggs. Women are waiting longer than ever to start a family, but if they wait too long, it can be difficult to get pregnant. Now they have another alternative. As Lori Johnson shows us, the technology of egg freezing can slow down the biological clock.
Ashley Skidmore is a 24-year-old writer living in Los Angeles. Biologically, this is the best time for her to have a baby, but that doesn't exactly fit with her lifestyle plans.
I definitely want to have kids someday. 10, 15 years, maybe. I mean, I've got a career to take care of first, before I can take care of a human being.
She's not alone. The number of women waiting to start a family until after age 35 is up 150% since the 1970s.
A demanding career isn't the only reason women put off trying to get pregnant. The main reason is they just haven't found Mr. Right.
Sadly, when many of these women are ready, their eggs are no longer viable. Dr. Jeffrey Steinberg is a fertility specialist.
Women are most fertile from basically the time they get their first period up until about the early 30s. There's a definite decline in the fertility rates at age 35, and there's a drastic fall off the cliff at age 40.
Not only is it more difficult to conceive as a woman ages, the baby's health can also be affected. The good news is a woman can now beat the biological clock by freezing her young, healthy eggs.
It's a simple procedure. There's no incisions, there's no cuts. It's all done with ultrasound guidance. Takes about 30 to 45 minutes, does not hurt, and the woman is back to her normal activities the next day.
Her eggs are stored in liquid nitrogen until she's ready to use them.
We've become very, very good at accurately predicting that the eggs will make it through the freeze and the thaw process and even onto a baby.
This practice has led to the births of an estimated 2,000 babies.
Before we do these procedures, we do some basic blood work on women that give us very important clues that the eggs are in good shape.
Unfortunately, some of them are not in good shape because the woman waited too long to try to freeze them.
But the problem is, in the late 30s, they haven't got near the chance that they have in the early 20s. So it's a terrible dilemma for us. We wish they would have come in sooner.
Elizabeth Higgins Clark got the message.
I'm so glad I did it.
The Hollywood actress froze her eggs in her 20s.
I started realizing that I knew I wanted to have children. I've always wanted to have children, but I knew that I wasn't close to being ready to have children.
She says her decision relieved the anxiety that's so common among women her age.
There's something about it that makes me feel like I'll never have to make a decision out of fear, and that's the best part of it.
The price of egg freezing runs between $9,000 and $15,000. Since most 20-somethings don't have access to that kind of money, fertility clinics typically offer financing, with monthly installments about the same as a car payment. Some companies like Apple and Facebook offer insurance plans that cover egg freezing. So for women hoping to get pregnant later in life, freezing their eggs early on could improve their chance at motherhood. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Up next, fighting back against the tidal wave of pornography. See one church's mission to help 1 million men find freedom. In many ways, pornography has become an epidemic in America. That's why one Florida church has made it a major part of its ministry to battle porn addiction. CBN's Paul Strand talked with senior pastor Jay Dennis about what his church is doing to help people stay porn-free.
Pastor, what made you decide to come up with this, what you call hardcore battle plan?
The men in our church, Paul, began coming to me, many of them saying I'm struggling with this issue. But we heard wives as well coming to our staff members saying my husband has a problem, my son has a problem. So I began to look for resources in order to address this with our men. And there are some great resources available, but I felt like I needed to craft something from the heart of a senior pastor. So therefore began putting these resources together just to teach our men. I took 6 weeks to teach them and challenge them to make a pornography-free commitment. And I'm happy to say that we have over 2,000 men just in our church who have made that commitment.
I think the major myth out there among Christian men is that they're all alone. This is they're like some sort of abomination all on their own. That's not true, is it? Like, how many men are we talking about in the church that have this problem?
Here's what I believe. I believe that 80% of men in churches are struggling at some level with viewing pornography. Interestingly enough, Lifeway Christian Resources did a survey of 1,000 pastors. 62% of those pastors said they believe 10% or less of the men in their churches are struggling. So you see the disconnect there. It's more like, I believe, 80%, and so many men are suffering in silence and shame and in guilt, feeling they're the only ones dealing with that, where there are many of their brothers who are battling this, and increasingly Christian women battling this as well.
And now another myth is I think people feel that this is something they can't get out of. And is that a myth? Can anybody be free of pornography?
Absolutely, and I love that, and that's why we are focusing only on believers, only inside the church with this, because we have the power of the Holy Spirit. We have a resurrected Savior living within us. There is a way out, and for those who are listening today, I want them to understand if they are battling this, they can get free. Now, it's more than just signing a card. It's more than just saying, I'm not going to do it anymore. It involves accountability. It involves software. It involves spiritual disciplines. You have to take ownership of this issue, but to be sure, you can break free from this.
Now, you've taken all the strategies that I've ever seen, good fighting strategies in this, and put them together. But one of your best tricks, I think, is acrostics, taking a word, and people can remember how to fight pornography by saying this word to themselves. And you start from, man, like, capture your thoughts.
Yes.
And what's the thing you use? You use the word stop, don't you?
Yeah, S-T-O-P. And when I was in Fuller Seminary, my professor, Arch Hart, said that he used that to say out loud, stop the thought in order to interrupt the thought, a sinful thought. So we took that, put it together into an acrostic in order to help men and women to not only confess a sinful thought, but to replace a sinful thought. And that's a tool that we have tried to use. years is to help men to know how to take God's Word in a 31-day kind of a strategy or a process where they would meditate on one verse each day, and as a result, they're replacing that sinful thought.
Now, what website can guys go to if they want to learn how to fight themselves?
Yes.
What's your website?
It's join1millionmen.org, and that is the number one.
All right, great. We've been talking to Pastor Jay Dennis, who has our hardcore battle plan, how every man in the church can be free from pornography.
And finally, today it has been 50 years since author Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, and now a sequel to the 88-year-old's novel is set to be released in July. It's titled Go Set a Watchman. Lee says she wrote the book in the mid-50s and is, quote, humbled and amazed that it will be published after all of these years. She lives in an assisted living center in her hometown of Monroeville, Alabama. A longtime friend says Lee is blind, deaf, and in poor health, but I'm sure hopefully excited about this new book. And that is it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues that you care most about at cbnnews.com. Please tell us what you think about the stories that you've seen here. Have a great day.